Hello, everyone. Welcome to Political Election 2020. I'm Jan Smith, and as always, joined by Connor.
Good morning, everyone.
So we just got finished. Good morning, indeed. We just got finished watching the final debate of the election. And again, we just wanted to do a bit of a reaction video. The last video we did this on the last debate, we did a reaction video, and I think it went down quite well. So decided to do that again. So I think just to kind of contextualize this debate going into it, there was maybe kind of three kind of things that we were thinking about going into it. One, the moderator. What was the moderator's performance going to be after the disastrous performance of Chris Wallace, and then even to some extent as well, Susan Rice in the vice presidential debate. And going into this as well, there was the whole thing with the changing the rules and the microphone, and we were thinking, how will Trump handle that kind of environment? Will he be able to just kind of like stay calm and, presidential, if you will? And obviously, with Biden, we were, hoping he was going to kind of, perhaps naively, we were hoping he was going to get scrutinized a little bit on the laptop scandal and the email scandal, and perhaps even backed into a corner a little bit on things like the Supreme Court. And I suppose this is another test as well for his cognitive ability. Is he able to kind of hold up to that pressure without, falling apart like he has done so many times? So, Connor, I think just to start, what did you think about the moderator to begin with?
Well, Kristen Welker, she's better than Chris Wallace. We can pretty much agree on that. Just on my gut reaction, I felt that she was a little bit pro-Biden. She interrupted Trump quite often. She didn't interrupt Biden at all, I can remember. And we know that Biden interrupted Trump more times the other way around. So I kind of would have liked to see her, be a bit firmer with Biden, let Trump talk for more. The questions weren't really objective too. It felt very much like a play, to be honest. It felt very much like everything in that room was stacked to suppress Donald Trump. But that being said, Kristen Welker did hold Biden to the flame on some things. She did ask some tough questions, and Biden even got angry, didn't he? A few points. So,
Yeah. I think so in terms of the interruptions, like Biden 25 to Trump 24 interruptions, I don't know. I felt like Biden interrupted a lot more than that. I think just apart from towards the end, Biden was just the only one doing any of that. But just in terms of the questions, it seemed every question was like, it felt framed to be like a Biden attack, a talking point. Like it was set up for him to attack Trump. There wasn't any real. There should have been a section just dedicated really to foreign policy. Instead, it was like, foreign influence or whatever. Like it wasn't foreign policy, and which typically the last debate always is always on foreign policy. And obviously that's Trump's, like, many people would say that's the highlight of his administration so far is his foreign policy, not starting all these new endless wars, etc. I don't want to, ramble on about it, but so yeah, I agree with you in that sense.
That being said, with the questions, I guess before the debate, what I was thinking, I was quite scared that they would do their best to kind of suppress the Hunter Biden story, and they did give it a good couple of minutes. I guess it's not really a question in terms of asking them, but she did allow it to be asked, which I was quite grateful for, to be honest. I quite like to see them under scrutiny, because mainstream media aren't going to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I think the issue is obviously it's just very easy for Biden to just, that's not true, and then listen, we were never going to really bring too much attention to it here. Hopefully, what it does do is it gets people to at home who haven't heard about this go, well, hold on, what's that about? And they listen, want to read about it and listen about it. But
that being said, because almost every attack point that Trump made, Biden came back with that's not true, that's false. And I think it really resounds. Do you remember that bit where Trump got him? He called him a typical politician. He called him out
Mm.
on some of his mannerisms and that sort of thing, his pitches to camera. I think that really resonates. I think a lot of voters are going to see Biden going, oh, false, false, false. It's just a typical politician talk, isn't it? Any attack point is just a falsehood.
Yeah, I tell you what, something that really irritated me, because he does that a lot. Kamala Harris does that a lot as well, where they just kind of turn to the camera and they go, I'm going to just basically rattle off now a little pre-scripted speech like it's a campaign ad. And it's like, no, you're at a debate. You're supposed to like focus on your opponent. You're talking to your opponent. But obviously they're not very good debaters, so they need to find a way to kind of turn it into a positive that they have this platform. And it's like, well, here's just a platform for me to rattle off a campaign speech. And yeah, I thought that was great the way that Trump pointed that out and just mocked him over it, because it's like a lot of people possibly, I think, felt that as well. They were like, oh, I hate it when you do that. You know, just like it's really condescending and patronizing to like, does anyone really think, apart from, you know, the most devout Democrats who are obviously incredibly partisan anyway, that Joe Biden really cares about the American people? Because, you know, if he did, then he'd probably have a better record to show for it, I think. But yeah, so I think Trump did a really good job at doing that and mocking him and pressuring him on those things. So I guess, do you think Trump kind of passed the test on this one of the questions that were going to be asked to him, that were being asked of him leading into it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, the entire debate, as I said before, the entire debate seemed to be set up to disadvantage him. And so I think it came out quite well. His attack points were sharp. And I mean, there was just that beautiful moment where I think they were talking about race, and Trump called Biden out. He said, well, why didn't you get it done in the last 8 years? And Biden said, Republican Congress. And then there was 6 seconds of silence,
Yeah.
and the tumbleweed drifted through the room. And then President Trump literally just said, well, you got to talk him into it, Joe. I thought that was a crowning moment of the night. Yeah, I think Donald Trump came off as very presidential, which was obviously a concern after the first debate. He came across as a very calm, basically the opposite of how he comes across on Twitter. I think he's done well in that respect. I think he'd have done better than Biden. What do you think?
Yeah, certainly. And that point as well, like you mentioned, that was the absolute best moment of it. There was just that awkward silence, and you even heard the moderator as well, where she just goes, okay then, right, so moving on. And it was just, I actually felt really awkward for Biden, because that's not going to fly with anyone, is it? It's like, oh, you've been serving the American people for 47 years in the Senate and as a vice president. Why didn't you do anything about all these things that you're talking about, you're saying you're going to do now? And then like, oh yeah, the Republican Congress is like, right, no one. That's just, it was so incredibly awkward and embarrassing for him.
But did you notice after as well? Immediately afterwards, he checks his watch, but the camera cuts away towards the moderator. The moderator got barely any camera time throughout this, but at just the moment where he looked super awkward, I mean, you could see he was getting a bit red in the face. He checked his watch, and the camera pans away. So again, that goes back to the, maybe it's a subtle thing. Maybe it's just me being crazy, but I definitely saw that.
Yeah, I think, no, I did as well, and I think that's actually across all 3 debates, if you include the vice presidency one, that was, for me, that's the moment that in 10, 20 years' time, people will still think of. That will be the highlight of all of the debates for me. Like every presidential campaign has that one moment, at least, where it's like, oh, well, that was kind of like super awkward. And obviously, like with Trump, it's like when you think about Trump and Clinton, and it was like, oh, because you'd be in jail. You know, that was kind of like that moment of that, of this race and of those debates. So I think that's, and it's good.
You're watching the top 10 presidential debates, gaff moments in 10 years. It's going to be number one's going to be Sleepy Joe crashing the room.
We'll be making that video in 18 months. But Yeah, so again, I guess same question, and I sound like I'm right now, but same question, but on Biden. Do you think Biden passed the test?
Well, I think it's very interesting because he was given more time uninterrupted, right? And so when you give Joe Biden more time to speak, the chances of him messing it up go exponentially higher, right? And
Yeah.
so I think the crowning moment of that was at the end, where he said he's going to, remove state subsidies for oil. He's going to destroy the oil industry. I don't think any campaign manager would have told him to say that. That's straight from that's a Sleepy Joe gaff right there. I guess if you wanted me to sum it up, he was under a lot of scrutiny for the words he was going to say. Trump was under scrutiny for his character, right? But
Yeah.
Joe Biden was under scrutiny for his policy, his flip flops, and everything. I don't think he came out very well. And on fracking too, but he just outright lied. I think he came across very badly.
Oh yeah. I've never said that I oppose fracking. I think was the actual phrase that he said, which is just laughable. And I think people have seen the clips. Obviously, they know they would have seen him in Trump campaign ads, so they know that that's obviously a blatant lie.
He even got in a Hitler reference. Is it Godwin's law that all arguments come to Hitler? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we can get onto that as well, but yeah. So I think, listen, Biden could have done much worse, obviously, but we did say, and I heard a lot of people saying this, and we said this as well after the first debate. Trump doesn't need to interrupt Biden because he just needs to let him talk himself, dig his own grave essentially. And confuse himself as he starts talking, which he often does. Like if he feels like he's got that time to fill, he starts getting a little bit flustered and he stutters and he's like, and that's what he did, and he did that on a number of occasions where Trump just kind of let him speak, and I think that really played out well from Trump's perspective in terms of the tactics there. And that is like one of the moments where it's just like, oh, you're giving him more time to speak. Actually, Biden's policies, aren't very popular. So the more you let him talk about them, the worse he's going to do.
They're not just popular as unpopular as swing voters. They're unpopular with the left. And I think Trump, he displayed his real genius in that he maneuvered Joe Biden into attacking Bernie Sanders, like in that debate. Which is that going to go down well with Bernie and his crew?
No, this is it. I mean, Biden kept making a point of how he opposed basically everyone else in the primaries, and it's like, yeah, but you still have to unite your own party here. We're going on about, oh, I'm so different from all of the other people in the party. It's like that's not gonna win you any votes from Democrats, apart from those that actually would just hate Trump so much anyway they don't care. Like it could be, a giant turd. Like on South Park, running, and it'd be like, yeah, the giant turd's better than Trump now. I'd definitely go with that. Yeah, so listen, let's talk about, again, just some of the actual things then that they were talking about in depth. So obviously on the coronavirus, for me, Trump really, listen, that's obviously the biggest thing that they can attack him on. And he did, I think, a really good job because it was, I think, definitely the biggest section of the actual debate. I think he did a really good job of just making it about the economy and making it about we need to get the country open. And I think that resonates now with a lot of people, not just in the US, but all over the world, in all of these countries, who are just like, I'm sick of lockdowns. Like, we can't just keep hiding away. We can't keep destroying everything that we've built up, our entire countries, our entire economies, putting all of these people out of work for this thing. We need to find a new way forward than these lockdowns. And he kind of got cornered Biden, where Biden was like saying, yeah, I would lock it down if this and that, like he has done before.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think that Trump comes off better because the coronavirus is an issue if Joe Biden can land a knockout blow, can't he? But he doesn't do that. And as you say, Trump does very well in turning it into the economy. But then Biden also had a few counterpoints. I mean, his line saying, particularly on Wall Street, that they're backing him and stuff. Okay, whatever. But I think he made one huge gaffe very early on. He said, Joe Biden said, we owe China a debt of gratitude. And I don't think that one's going to go down very well, but we'll see.
Yeah, certainly it won't resonate with anyone at all, will it? I think just to talk about that, because you were talking about the economic plans, and what actually has happened is, the left-wing media will run with all of the positive, reviews of Biden's economic plan. What a lot of people perhaps don't realize, and listen, I'm not going to come here and say I'm an expert on economics. What I do realize, though, is that economics is not a science, really. It is very much of an objective topic, and it's an objective area, and it's not something that there is like this defined, this is the way it should be. Otherwise there wouldn't be all of this. There wouldn't be a political spectrum. It would just be, no, this is the way you do it. So yeah, Biden basically says, oh look guys, all of these left thinking economists support my plan. It's like, well, obviously they do. But then when you see the reviews of it by people that you would consider more, conservative thinking economics, they go, no, actually the plan is going to make Americans, the average family, $6,500 a year worse off. So I just think trying to weaponize economists, I think, for me, never really resonates, because I just don't think it's like, well, of course, like, because they think differently. So you can easily go and get someone who thinks that we should do what you want to do and then say why it's going to be great. But, it's basically like going to court and hiring an expert witness who's like turns up and says, oh yeah, no, the guy's totally innocent. Here's why. Like, it's hardly they're going to turn up and, that you've hired them, and they're going to turn up and be like, oh, no, I think he's guilty, So for me, that doesn't really work. But what about then? They were talking about, we talked about this should be like foreign policy thing. There wasn't really like a foreign policy bit. It was more of a election interference section, I suppose. So, how did you think about like Biden's or both of their response on that bit?
Well, I mean, the standout bit is it happens very early on in that section, where Trump brings up the Hunter Biden scandal, and I think that was an opportunity for Joe Biden. He has the biggest stage in the world to kind of dismiss this thing out of hand. Say he can prove it. Say he will release his messages to a third-party investigator or something. There are 1,000 things Joe Biden could have done to defuse the Hunter Biden things, and he didn't. To me, I think to you too, that perhaps as a guilty party who literally can't do that. But in the end, he just sat there mumbling that it was false. So he's not really dissuaded anyone there, because of course he's going to say it's false. But actually going back onto the subject, I think Trump's the strong winner. Again, he called Joe Biden out on dodging the question. He called him a typical politician. I think that resonated really well. Joe Biden just mumbled about getting China to play by the rules. He didn't see how he's going to do that. He's just going to ask them nicely, I guess. And then he compared Trump to Hitler as well. So for me, Biden gets an F for this one.
I think he compared King Jong-il to Hitler. He was basically, he says Trump, oh, we get along. He basically, Trump was saying we get along with him, and he says, oh, we got along with Hitler. And it's like, yeah, but that argument doesn't really work unless then America does go to war, or if King Jong-il is going around planning on, invading like Asia or something, like, or invading South Korea, I guess would be the more appropriate way of putting it. But so, as far as people are concerned, North Korea was a big threat. I remember, like, going into Trump's administration, people were concerned about North Korea. You don't really hear people talk about North Korea so much anymore, because I feel like Trump has tamed that. And, he even got nominated Nobel Prize for it years ago now at this point, which, again, that's the thing. Should have been on foreign policy. This is one of Trump's biggest positives and in his administration. And, there's no mention of... There should have been, like, if you're going to talk about, if the moderator is going to, they should really be when you've got an incumbent, they should be saying, look, here's what the incumbent says is one of their positives. What do you say to that? Right? And so there was no question like, oh, Trump's done these Middle East peace deals. He's been nominated for Nobel Peace Prize like 4 times overall. What did you guys do when you were in for 8 years and for the 39 years before that, Joe? Like, so there was none of that. And listen, we're kind of repeating what we were talking about before because it did feel incredibly biased. But I think just going back to the Hunter Biden thing, though, Trump really should have, because that was really his strongest attacking point in the sense that it's a new, fresh thing. It's a new scandal. The media isn't reporting on it. He needs to bring media. He needs to bring attention to it. And I think he could have really laid it out like, listen, there was this laptop. On the laptop, there was this email. It said you get 10% of the equity in this Chinese deal. Were you the vice president? What do you have to say to defend yourself? And Biden's response anyway probably would have been the same, which was, oh, no, not you. Not me, you. You're the one that makes money in China, Trump. You're the one that does this. And it's like, I think a lot of people who didn't know about the Hunter Biden thing, probably they wouldn't have had any idea what Trump was talking about because he wasn't specific enough about what was actually on the laptop and in the emails.
No, sure. Well, we're going to have to see how this one plays out, won't we? Because I think there could be an increase in press attention to it now. It's kind of been legitimized. It's talked on the biggest stage in the country. They can't ignore it for much longer.
Yeah. And then just finally then, I guess, let's just talk about as well the immigration. Because I think on immigration, they were Trump had a brilliant bit where they were talking about the kids in cages and this kind of thing. And he said, well, you were the ones that built the cages, right? You built the cages. And he was like denying it. And he's like, well, who built the cages, Joe? And he just sort of caught him in that little trap and he had no response to it.
No, absolutely. No response at all. And Trump was very powerful on this. He's a very good debater, isn't he? And he got him by the balls. You could see him squirming. Who built the cages, Joe? And Joe talks about something else. So I think that will stick in people's minds, especially if you're one of these kind of Christian voters. You have your morals. You're perhaps lean Republican, but you're just a bit uneasy with Trump and some of the excesses, allegations that have been made against him. I think that could have swayed a lot of these types of people against Joe Biden and back towards Trump.
So I think with Trump is that he has it in his arsenal, the weapons to blunt the attacks that come at him, but he doesn't always go to them and use them. And with immigration, they want to try and frame him to be a racist. There's a lot of American people out there who, they're called a racist all the time, when actually the reality is, they're just concerned about illegal immigration and they're concerned about, undocumented immigrants being in the country, 11 million of them, as Joe even referenced. And he, I thought he did a really good job in this debate of taking those attacks of calling him a racist and this and that and inhumane and immoral and turning it into an issue which is one of the things that got him elected. Is something that resonates with voters, which is that people are concerned about immigration. He did a really good job of that. On the other hand, Joe Biden is talking about, a path to naturalize like 11 million people. And I don't think that I don't think Joe's going to win over too many voters talking about naturalizing 11 million people.
No, I think only the most radical of leftists thinks that 11 million people can be brought into the country in a period of time, let's say 2-3 years, if you're on a path to citizenship, it being sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, overall then, I guess I'll give my closing remarks. I think again, if I was to give Trump a kind of a score out of 10, it's probably going to be somewhere in the region of like an 8. I think there are a couple of areas where I think with the Hunter Biden email and everything, he really should have done more to kind of talk about that and make it clear to people what that was about so that they could research it themselves. But he did really good at de-weaponizing a lot of the attacks that Biden had on him. He had them talking about coronavirus, about the economy all the time, instead of, about the deaths and this kind of thing. And he managed to drag a lot of the biased questions towards topics that were like positive to him. And then Biden, on the other hand, I think by letting him speak a lot, he sort of forced him to stumble on a lot of the issues.
No, I absolutely agree. An 8, I would say I'm going to be that annoying person. I'm going to say a 7.5 because I think what conservatives and Trump fans really could have used right now was a standout Trump performance where he delivered a knockout blow. I think that's the sort of thing that could have really swung the election. We saw this in 2016. We didn't quite see it here. Of course, this is just the initial reaction. I don't think he landed knockout blow, and I think he needed it. So I'll say 7.5, a very good performance, but it perhaps fell a bit short of what was needed.
Right. Well, there you have it. I guess. I mean, we've yet to actually see any kind of like polls of sort of who won or anything like that just yet. But I imagine we're probably going to do another video on this at some point, just to kind of give more of less of a immediate reaction and more about if this does actually have any tangible impact on anything. So if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing, so you will get a notification for that. And as all, thank you to everyone that's watching this, and we'll see you in the next one.